Welcome back for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be diving deep into the 1960s counterculture
Oh, yeah.
with Tom Wolfe's The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, a book that's wild, adventurous, and insightful social commentary all at the same time.
It's fascinating how this book, it really captures a specific moment in time, when so much was changing and so many norms were being challenged.
Yeah, and what makes this one even more interesting is that you've given me a podcast episode about the book as source material.
Yeah.
So we get to see how other people are interpreting this as well.
It's like another layer, another lens through which to view this complex story, controversial at times.
For those who haven't read the Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, picture this. Ken Kesey, fresh off the success of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest,
Good book.
decides to just check the literary establishment and hit the road.
Just say, see you later.
Yeah, with this group of free spirits called the Merry Pranksters.
The Merry Pranksters, and their vehicle of choice is none other than a psychedelically painted school bus named Further.
Okay.
And driven by, get this, Neal Cassady.
Neal Cassady.
Who Kerouac fans will recognize as the inspiration for Dean Moriarty from On the Road.
It's like these two literary worlds are colliding, the Beats and the Pranksters, don't you think?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
And hold on, it gets even better. For music lovers out there.
Oh, yeah.
The house band, for some of the Pranksters' infamous acid tests, was none other than...
It's great.
The Grateful Dead.
Yeah, back when they were still called the Warlocks.
Right.
I love that little detail.
Yeah. This connection between the Beats, the Pranksters, and this burgeoning music scene of the 1960s, it's really telling.
It is. It speaks to a larger countercultural movement that was taking shape at the time.
Right.
This wasn't just about LSD. It was about art, music, literature, and a deep desire to just break free from all those societal constraints.
Okay, so we got Kesey, we've got this band of merry pranksters, a psychedelic bus, and now the Grateful Dead. What exactly were these acid tests?
So imagine parties fueled by LSD, designed to kind of break down perceptions of reality.
Wow.
They were happenings, performances, and social experiments all rolled into one.
Wow.
Kesey saw LSD not just as a drug, but as like a tool, A tool to unlock all this hidden potential, to expand your consciousness, and just to challenge the status quo.
And Tom Wolfe, with his unique style of new journalism, just throws us right into the middle of it all.
Oh, yeah. He didn't just observe these events, he immersed himself in them.
Right.
And his writing really reflects this, blurring the lines between fiction and nonfiction, capturing the raw energy and just chaos of the prankster's journey in a way that traditional reporting never could.
So he's using literary techniques like stream of consciousness and vivid imagery to create this truly immersive experience for the reader.
Exactly. You're on the bus with them, you're feeling the vibrations, you're hearing the music, and you're experiencing the world through their kind of altered perceptions.
And this is where new journalism really broke ground, wasn't it?
It was. It was about using these techniques to capture the truth of an experience, even if it meant bending some of those traditional rules of journalism.
So it's not just about reporting the facts, it's about conveying the feeling, the vibe, the essence of what it was like to be part of this movement.
Precisely. Wolfe was a master of this. But the question is, did he go too far? Did he glamorize the counterculture?
And that's one of the big things that the podcast episode you gave me delves into.
Yes.
The hosts have this really interesting discussion about the ethics of it all.
It's a valid point. The pranksters were pushing boundaries in a lot of ways, not just with LSD.
Right.
Their pursuit of freedom and rejecting all societal norms led to some pretty unconventional and potentially risky behavior.
And that leads to a really important question. How much freedom is too much?
Right.
Where do you draw the line between personal liberation and just reckless abandon?
It's a question that the book grapples with, and one that the podcast hosts seem to be wrestling with as well.
Yeah. And this is what makes this deep dive so compelling. We're not just talking about a book. We're talking about ideas, about choices, about complexities of human nature.
Absolutely.
We're talking about what it means to be free.
And what happens when that pursuit of freedom collides with the realities of the world around you.
Right.
The prankster's story isn't just a celebration of rebellion. It's also a cautionary tale about the potential consequences of pushing boundaries too far.
It makes you wonder if true freedom can ever exist without some sort of structure, some boundaries, some sense of responsibility.
Or does the act of defining those boundaries kind of negate the essence of true freedom? That's a question that's still debated today.
It all goes back to that tension between individuality and community, doesn't it?
It does.
The pranksters, they rejected mainstream society, yet they created their own tight-knit community
Yeah.
with its own set of rules and expectations. It's a fascinating paradox.
It is. It's like they were trying to carve out a space for themselves where they could be truly free.
Yeah.
But even in that space, they couldn't escape the complexities of human relationships and social dynamics.
I think that's something a lot of people can relate to, even if they've never dropped acid or ridden on a psychedelic bus.
Right.
We all crave freedom,
Yeah.
but we also need connection.
We do.
It's about finding that balance.
Yeah.
That sweet spot where we can be ourselves without losing ourselves in the process.
And that brings us back to Wolfe's new journalism.
Yes.
And how he captures that struggle in such a visceral way.
Yes.
His style might not be for everyone.
Right.
But you can't deny its power to transport you to another time and place, to make you feel the chaos and the exhilaration of the prankster's journey.
It's like you're right there with them, experiencing it all firsthand.
Exactly.
And maybe, just maybe, that's what Wolfe intended all along.
Right?
Make us feel, to make us think, to make us question everything we thought we knew
Yeah.
about freedom, about society, about ourselves.
And to make us wonder, what would we have done if we were in their shoes?
Right.
Would we have hopped on that bus? Would we have taken that leap of faith into the unknown?
And that's where things start to get really interesting.
That's right. Because the podcast that you share, it
Yeah.
brings up some points about the book that are quite insightful.
Okay.
And I think we should dive into that a little further.
Okay. Let's unpack what the podcast hosts had to say. I'm really curious to hear their take on all of this.
One thing that really struck me about the podcast was how the hosts, they connected the electric Kool-Aid acid test to other cultural things at the time.
Right.
You know, they drew some interesting parallels
Yeah.
between Ken Kesey and the Merry Pranksters and the Beat Generation,
Right.
particularly through Neil Cassidy.
Right. It's like Cassidy was this living link between these two countercultural movements.
He was.
Yeah. First, he was the inspiration for Dean Moriarty in Kerouac's On the Road.
Right.
And then he's behind the wheel of Further with the Pranksters.
It makes you wonder if Cassidy himself saw those experiences as connected.
Yeah.
Was his role with the Pranksters simply an extension of his beat sensibilities?
Right.
Or did it represent a shift in his outlook? The podcast host didn't really dive too deep into that,
Right.
but it's definitely something that I found myself thinking about.
Yeah, it's like he's this through line, this thread that connects these different expressions of rebellion
Right.
and the search for something outside the mainstream.
Absolutely. And don't forget the music.
Oh, yeah.
The podcast hosts also pointed out the significance of the Grateful Dead being the house band for some of the acid tests, or the Warlocks as they were known then.
Right.
It's a reminder that this countercultural movement was multifaceted, you know? Music was just as important as literature and art
Yeah.
in expressing that desire to just break free from societal norms.
It's like they were all feeding off of each other.
Yeah.
Inspiring each other, creating this mix of creativity and experimentation.
Exactly. That's something I think is really important to emphasize. This wasn't just a bunch of people taking LSD and acting crazy.
Right.
There was a much deeper artistic and intellectual current running through it all.
The podcast hosts weren't afraid to get critical either.
No.
They brought up some valid points about how Wolfe, as an outsider, might have romanticized or oversimplified the counterculture.
Yeah, that's a perspective worth considering.
Yeah.
Even with his immersive style, Wolfe was still an observer.
Right.
Did he capture the true essence of the movement, or did he project his own interpretations onto it?
It makes you think about the whole idea of objectivity in storytelling, doesn't it?
It does.
Can anyone ever truly tell a story without their own biases and perspectives coloring the narrative?
That's the age-old question, isn't it? We all bring our own baggage to every experience, every interaction.
Right.
And as storytellers, we can only ever present our own interpretation of events.
And then there's the whole ethical question surrounding the acid tests themselves.
Oh, for sure.
The podcast host spent some time discussing that as well.
They did. And it's a topic that deserves a lot of thoughtful consideration.
Yeah.
Giving people LSD without proper safety precautions or informed consent, that's a whole other conversation.
It makes you realize how much attitudes towards drugs and experimentation have changed over the years.
They really have.
What might have seemed radical or liberating back then could be viewed as reckless or even dangerous today.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that historical context is really crucial when you're analyzing events and behaviors from the past.
Yeah.
We can't judge them solely through the lens of our own time.
The podcast host also had some differing opinions about Wolfe's unique writing style.
Oh, yeah.
One of them found it brilliant, the other found it a bit overwhelming.
Understandable. Wolfe's prose is definitely not for the faint of heart.
Right.
It's energetic, fragmented, often chaotic, mirroring those experiences that he's describing.
Yeah.
It can be exhilarating for some readers and exhausting for others.
Do you think his style ultimately enhances or detracts from the story he's trying to tell?
It's a tough call. I can see both sides of the argument. On one hand, his unconventional style perfectly captures that manic energy and stream of consciousness flow of the pranksters world.
Right.
It's immersive and often quite powerful.
On
But
the other hand.
on the other hand, it can be a bit much. Some readers might find it difficult to follow, and it could potentially overshadow the deeper themes and insights that Wolfe is trying to convey.
It's like he's trying to make the writing itself a psychedelic experience.
Why?
Whether you enjoy that write or not is up to you.
Exactly. But regardless of your opinion on Wolfe's style,
Yeah.
there's no denying that the electric Kool-Aid acid test is a significant work.
Right.
It's a snapshot of a time and a movement that had a profound impact on American culture, and it continues to resonate today.
And it raises some big questions about freedom, about community, about the search for meaning in a world that often feels meaningless.
Exactly. And those questions are just as relevant today as they were back in the 1960s.
Which brings us back to that question we posed earlier. Would we have hopped on that bus with the Merry Pranksters?
Right.
Knowing what we know now,
Yeah.
having read the book and listened to the podcast,
Yeah.
would we have taken that leap into the unknown?
It's a question that requires some serious introspection.
Yeah.
It's easy to romanticize the idea of dropping out and embracing a life of radical freedom.
Sure.
But as we've seen, the reality is much more complex.
There were moments of pure joy, creativity, and a sense of belonging.
Absolutely.
But there was also chaos, disillusionment,
Right.
and the potential for things to go very wrong.
So the question isn't just whether we would have joined,
Yeah.
but whether we could have handled the realities of that life.
It's the question that challenges us to consider our own values,
Yeah.
our tolerance for risk, and our desire for something beyond the ordinary.
And maybe that's the most important takeaway from all of this. The electric Kool-Aid acid test isn't just a story about a group of people who took LSD and rode around in a psychedelic bus.
Right.
It's a story about the human condition,
Yeah.
about our yearning for freedom, our need for connection, and our struggle to find meaning in a world that often feels chaotic and absurd.
It's a story that resonates with something deep within us, something that makes us question our own place in the world and the choices we make.
And ultimately, that's what makes it such a powerful and enduring work.
Well, we've explored the story, delved into the historical context, unpacked the themes, and even contemplated our own place in this countercultural whirlwind.
We did it all.
Where does that leave us?
That's a great question. I think it's one that deserves some careful consideration.
Okay.
Why don't we take a moment to reflect on everything we've discussed and then come back with some final thoughts?
All right. I think I've had a moment to kind of process everything we've discussed.
Yeah, me too. It's a lot to take in.
It really is. The electric Kool-Aid acid test, it's such a multi-layered work.
Oh, for sure.
There's that surface level with all the wild adventures, the LSD-fueled escapades.
Right.
But then underneath, there's these deeper currents exploring themes of freedom, community, perception versus reality,
Right.
and this search for meaning. And what I find fascinating is how those themes continue to resonate today,
Yeah.
even for those of us who might not be drawn to the counterculture
I think right.
or psychedelic experimentation.
Absolutely. We all grapple with these questions, in some form or another.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be truly free?
Right.
How do we balance our need for individuality with our desire for connection?
Yeah.
What gives our lives meaning in a world that often feels chaotic and uncertain?
It's like the Merry Pranksters with all their eccentricities and unconventional choices.
Yeah.
They were grappling with the same, fundamental human questions
Totally.
that we still face today.
And maybe that's why their story continues to fascinate us.
Yeah.
They were pioneers in a way, just exploring uncharted territory, literally and figuratively.
But they were also flawed human beings, right?
We were.
They made mistakes, faced consequences,
Right.
and ultimately had to confront the limitations of their own ideologies.
Yeah, it's an important point. The electric Kool-Aid acid test isn't just some romanticized account of rebellion and freedom.
Right.
It's a nuanced portrayal of a complex social experiment with all its triumphs and failures.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes it such a valuable read even today.
For sure.
It challenges us to think critically about the choices we make,
Yes.
the communities we form, the values that guide our lives.
It encourages us to question our own perceptions of reality, too, and to be open to new experiences, even if they challenge our comfort zones a bit.
So, would we have hopped on that bus with the merry pranksters?
Ooh, good question.
I think the answer is more complicated than a simple yes or no.
I think so, too.
Yeah.
It's not about whether we would have joined them, but rather what their story teaches us about ourselves.
Yeah.
What resonates with us, what makes us uncomfortable.
Right. What questions does it raise for us about our own lives and our place in the world?
Yeah. Those are the questions I hope our listeners will ponder as they reflect on this deep dive.
Right.
The electric Kool-Aid acid test. It's more than just a book. It's a catalyst for self-discovery.
It is.
And a reminder that the journey is often just as important as the destination.
And as we navigate our own journeys, may we all find moments of joy, connection, and meaning.
Yeah.
Even amidst the chaos and uncertainty of life.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
Well, until our next deep dive.
Yes.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those minds open.
And remember, as Kesey famously said, you're either on the bus or off the bus.
Oh yeah, I love that quote.
Choose wisely.